Welcome back to The Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, disclosure, and everything else your friends, family, and coworkers are so sick and tired of hearing you go on and on about. Let's face it, it's been a number of years now, and you are watching your friends visibly age as you tell them about what's going on in the UAP world. The next time you are met with a blank expression or a 1,000-yard stare, just look them in the eye and say, I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I've got my friends over at The Night Shift because that's what we're here for. We're your support group. We have a great show for you today. We're going to unpack the UAP hearing and discuss whether or not it was a colossal failure or a monumental success or something in between. And we're going to break into it and get some analysis from Cristina Gomez. But first, let's introduce my producer and co-host, Xander Jones. Xander, how you doing, man?
The XLR cable beef is already back. Yeah, I'm good. It's been a long week. I'm wearing my long johns, ready for bed as soon as we can wrap up here. I've got a cold cider poured. Let's dive into what the hell happened this week.
We need to do a special holiday night shift with like a fireplace and like the rug,
some cigars, a whiskey,
the big chair sitting next to a shaggy dog. Oh, hi! Didn't see you there. Okay. Shout out to everybody in our chat and shout out to our mod squad, Chris and Brett. Welcome. It's great to see you all. We're going to get right into it today. I'm going to introduce our guests. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Cristina Gomez, a trailblazing researcher, journalist, and content creator in the UFO and paranormal fields. With a BA in communication and Venezuelan roots, Cristina brings a fresh and vibrant Gen Z perspective to these intriguing topics. Over the years, she has produced and hosted over 800 shows, including the hit radio series Shifting the Paradigm, where she's interviewed luminaries like Luis Elizondo, Brandon Fugal, and Harvard's Avi Loeb. Beyond her flagship program, Cristina co-hosts Mysteries with a History alongside veteran broadcaster Jimmy Church, exploring unexplained phenomena through the lens of history. She also presents Strangest News of the Week, a captivating look at recent developments in the mysterious and paranormal realms. Cristina's work has earned her a prominent voice in the community with appearances on top podcasts like Need to Know with Ross Coulthart, Fade to Black Radio, and the Micah Hanks program. Cristina combines sharp journalism with genuine curiosity, making her one of the most exciting voices in the study of the unknown. Cristina, welcome to The Night Shift.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to talk about this hearing with you, but I got to ask first, how are you? How you doing?
I'm trying to cope with all the negativity online right now from the hearing. It was like the internet's on fire. And I actually thought it went pretty well, but people are upset. How about you?
The hearing that just recently took place on Wednesday, there was a lot going on, and I think people are only focusing on the things that they were expecting, but there were a lot of hidden nuggets inside of it that are definitely worth mentioning, but I can understand the overall disappointment on this second hearing.
I watched some of your post-game breakdown, and I could tell you weren't thrilled about a lot of what was going on, but there were some nuggets in there. What was the biggest win for you out of this whole thing? Do you think there was one thing that really stood out?
Oh, definitely. And that was it just being addressed. The thing is that Lou Elizondo had made public in his written testimony and that he said when he was reading his 5-minute speech is UAP are real. And then just addressing that, having this hearing to discuss that, that's very big news. Now, was it as big as a bombshell as the hearing that took place July of 2023 with David Grush, Ryan Graves, and David Fravor? No, it did not meet those expectations. But I think, again, just them talking about it, having Chairwoman Nancy Mace covering it, asking amazing questions, there were some positive things that came from it.
It seems like everybody was pretty overwhelmingly impressed with the way Nancy Mace handled this. Like, this was just really well conducted. And she was very, she was on it. She really didn't give anybody wiggle room.
No, her first few minutes, she said, give me yes or no. answers. I don't want any BS. I don't want any fluff. Just give me the information that I want. And a lot of them were trying to kind of wiggle through it. And you could just tell on her face that she was not having it. Same with Anna Paulina Luna as well. Their facial expressions really said it all, that they are not here for the fluff. They are here for the answers. And the title for this latest UAP hearing was Exposing the Truth. But it seems like after when a lot of these representatives gave interviews, mainly to News Nation, a lot of them were disappointed with the hearing. Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina Luna, Nancy Mace did state that this is only the tip of the iceberg. With more hearings, we will get more information. But Burchett said it was kind of bogus. Like, they were giving us information that we already knew. Anna Paulina Luna said something very similar, that she doesn't want information on a book, but she wants information to have her questions answered properly, instead of I can answer that in a closed setting or in a skiff, which we heard last year. We're hearing it again. I expected that, but of course I was pretty disappointed in those answers.
You've got a really switched on community, and I'm just wondering, what was the overall sentiment from your viewers and listeners? Did they also feel like it was a kind of a nothing burger, or you get a mixed response?
It was more on the nothing burger aspect, but there were a lot of people that said, at least we're talking about this. 10, 20 years ago, this would have been unheard of. There would be no way that Congress would address the topic on UFOs. But here's the biggest takeaway from these hearings and the UAP caucus, even the error reports that we've been receiving, we just got one yesterday, is that they're not focusing on what Tim Burchett would say, little green men, but it's about the funding. Where is all this money going for these UFO offices and projects? If the government has been saying since Project Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book, there's nothing to see here. UFOs, what are those, right? And yet we've been funding this for since the early 1950s. But we don't know how much money is being spent. We don't know why it's being spent. If the government stance is, we already know the answers. And Nancy Mace made that very, very clear in the hearing near the beginning, stating exactly that. And I applaud her for it, because those are the questions that we really have to ask ourselves is, if you know the answers, why fund it?
That's a fair point. And I wonder, were you in general impressed with the quality of questions from the members of Congress who were questioning the witnesses? Did you feel like they were up to the task? Because it did feel like, for such a limited amount of time that we had, I know people were upset at the answers they got, but the people, they can only answer the questions that they're asked. So the first half of the equation is like they have to ask better questions. And I feel like a lot of them were kind of sort of rehashes of previous questions, or some of them were just kind of nonsensical. It just seemed like a lot of time got burnt up there. Did you get that vibe at all?
I kind of have to disagree on that one. I think a lot of these representatives asked good questions, and they have a lot on their plate. They can't know everything about this UFO topic, the UFO phenomenon. They only know so much, and they can only ask questions based on their knowledge. Yes, a lot of these questions were asked last year, but they're asked to new people, hopefully getting a new answer. Mace asked some really great questions. Jared Moskowitz asked some really spectacular questions, and I was genuinely shocked with how he was really trying to corner some of the panelists to get answers. One of the biggest things that stuck out to me are two things in near his beginning of the hearing is, you can't talk about Fight Club if there's no Fight Club. But then on top of that, he labeled Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet part of the deep state. I was like, are you allowed to say that? Like, is that okay? I was very shocked, but he had no filter. Something else that he had mentioned that I think caught a lot of people off guard is the fact that before this hearing took place, they were briefed by somebody, maybe even the men in black, to not ask certain questions and don't ask certain questions to certain panelists. He had made that information public. He stated that. And that's very alarming. If you have a question, you should ask it with no filter, or a very slight filter of it being appropriate, of course. But for these congressmen to be told they can't ask certain questions, it really goes to show how much these people in the shadows are really attempting to control this conversation. I've spoken to a lot of people that have stated that there are those in the background that want this to be spoken about, and those that are taking every step to not have people know about the UFO phenomenon. And let me state this: the hearing was meant to take place in September or October, according to Anna Paulina Luna, when she gave the answer to Ask a Poll. However, it got pushed all the way to November. And I had, and many others had, very mixed feelings about this. But at the end of the day, I'm actually kind of glad it happened in November, because if it took place in September or October, its original timing, it probably would have been outshined by the elections. But since this hearing took place right after the elections, people were able to focus on it more. And yet the hearing took place during the same time that what Trump and Biden were having some kind of communication. So people were talking more about the White House than this UFO hearing, very much like last year in July of 2023, where the Johnny Depp Amber Heard hearing or prosecution was going on, and millions of views were watching that, and only 100,000 or something were watching the UFO hearing. It was very disappointing when it comes to what people really have an interest in, and how the government and how the media is handling on where to maintain people's focus on.
You bring up an interesting point that we've gingerly tried to touch on this channel with mixed success, I'll say. What are your thoughts on the incoming administration? Is this a net positive for disclosure? Are you still not sure where you stand on it? Like, do we have a window here? It feels like these hearings are sort of teeing them up for the next 4 years. If they're going to take action, this is the information they're going to take it on.
After these latest elections, I've been asking the question, and I know other people have as well, that will Donald Trump be the disclosure president? Tim Burchett had mentioned this in his interview to News Nation on Wednesday, that the president-elect will release UFO files to the best of his ability. And he also mentioned here, and I have a quote for it because I found it so important, is that he says, Tim Burchett says, you tell Trump he doesn't have access to something and you better just get out of the way. So there is this level of optimism for the president-elect to release more information. And then you have Marco Rubio, who has been appointed the Secretary of State. He's definitely pushed for UFO news and protecting whistleblowers as well back in 2023. Then you have Matt Gaetz as well, who has been elected into a higher position. He was a part of the UAP caucus. And there are a few others as well. John Ratcliffe has been selected to be, oh my gosh, and his title is escaping me.
CIA director, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you guys. And he has very publicly spoken about his stance on UFOs, how more information needs to come forward. So recently, all of these people that are coming into power that have been appointed all heavily stand for UAP transparency. I feel like more so than in previous years. So I think in that category, it seems very promising that in the next 4 years or so, we might receive more information and maybe even more UFO files as well.
And I think it was, you mentioned Gates. I think he and Anna Paulina Luna tried to get into access to an Air Force base, and they were turned away.
That's correct.
Remember that? So it's interesting now that it's going to be, with his new position, what he's going to be able to uncover. I think that's a really great point. And Rubio, too, he seemed like a few years ago when he was sort of finding out about all this, he seemed really kind of visibly shaken by the stuff that he was learning. I remember when he came out of a briefing, and I think it was News Nation who caught him and did an interview with him, and he seemed kind of like, yeah, this is a huge problem, because either we have a bunch of people in our chain of command who are absolutely insane, or this is real. And it was like, those are your two options. And it's like, well, yeah, I think that's kind of where we're all at right now. We just want to know which one it is.
Exactly. And the biggest thing is that this is a bipartisan issue. It doesn't matter which stance you stand in politically, everyone cares about this subject. And that's one of the biggest plus sides to this. We've also heard when Hillary Clinton was running for president, she spoke about, if I become president, I will release UFO information. Bernie Sanders said the same. And so we're seeing this consistency that Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. We all care about this subject. And Donald Trump has stated in multiple interviews that he's constantly been asked about, what do you know about UFOs? What do you know about aliens and the government? Even his own son, Donald Trump Jr., asked his father that exact same question. And Trump had mentioned consistently in a lot of these interviews that he has been briefed on UFOs, but he can't share a lot of it aside from pilots, military pilots have spoken to him personally about the encounters that they've had, and Trump believes them. So that's a step in the right direction. But in today's age, in 2024, getting into 2025, a lot more people care about this subject, and they want transparency. They want disclosure. That's what it's really about.
I'm curious, as a creator and as a personality in this space, who you've been covering this for a long time, you know a lot about it. People respect your perspective and your opinions on these things. What has changed in the last few years? It seems like more and more people are coming on board with the disclosure UFO discussion, and it seems like it's going mainstream. Is that what you're seeing? Do you feel like that's an accurate description? And is it because we're so much more networked and we can share this information so much more easily than, say, 20, 30 years ago?
Yes, and yes, definitely. The UFO conversation has become very trendy, especially amongst celebrities. Miley Cyrus has shared her UFO encounter. Demi Lovato had her own TV show and has shared her experiences. Kesha, while her focus has been in the paranormal, she's also shown her interest in UFOs as well. And the list goes on and on. Even Muhammad Ali in the 70s and 80s shared his experiences, and during that time frame he was laughed at. He was like, I've had many experiences and encounters, and in the interviews that he gave, the audience was just cracking up. They're like, dude, you're out of your mind, you're crazy. But today, it's much easier for these celebrities that have huge followings to discuss this. And what sometimes people don't want to admit is that these celebrities are huge influencers. That's why we have the term influencer today across social media. And they are able to help those that follow them to say it's okay to have these conversations. It's okay to talk about this. And if you've had your own UFO sighting, speak about it. Report it is the best thing to do, of course, but many people look at celebrities as gods, which is not the best. But amongst children and teens, if the celebrities can talk about it, the audience can do the same.
That's a great point. And you reminded me of John Lennon is another one who had a sighting that he was very adamant about. Right. And there were just so many. I read a comment on our last discussion on the hearings, and somebody said, I just wrote it down because I thought this was summarized so many other people's perspective on this. It was just, this doesn't move the needle. And I thought, well, this isn't the object of the hearing isn't to necessarily move the needle. It's just to get information in front of the right people so that we can move the needle. Like, I think that's our job in covering this, is to try and figure out how to communicate this information to people in a way that they can digest and give them context and help them understand why all this is important. And I wonder if part of the problem in terms of people being disappointed with the hearing itself is that their expectations are all over the place for what this should be. And I'm curious, as, again, someone you're very steeped in this topic, what would it take for you to say, we've turned the page, we're in a new era now, things are different? Like, what does the big D disclosure look like? Is it the president actually coming out and saying it officially? Like, what is that? How do we define what we're looking for?
That would be really cool. And all of our definitions of disclosure are different. I would say that we're in that moment now. having these conversations. There are so many shows, TV shows, movies, and the list goes on, talking about these things more so than ever. And as you had stated, we're the people filling in the gaps, those that are decently familiar with the topic and making it as digestible as possible, because the government, not only do they like to overclassify things, they use jargon that the general public isn't familiar with, or these reports that come out, you're like, I don't really know what I'm reading if you don't have a trained eye for it. And so you and I and so many others are just making this conversation as easy to grasp, as easy to find, and to make it as digestible as possible. And that's what's so important. So I think right now we're in that moment of disclosure, but of course it would be incredible for the president, any president, to talk out about this as a PSA, right? That would be amazing. Or to have another huge mass sighting. I think that might have to be one of the best ways to receive disclosure, is where it can't be covered up. That would be incredible as well. But if you ask anyone that's had their own experience, that's disclosure for them. So it's hard to say on what it would be and how it would look, but we're heading in the right direction.
I think, yeah, for people who have had an individual experience, you're right. It is, they don't need any convincing. They want acceptance.
Exactly.
And it seems also like the disclosure part, you could say, I think, Xander, you pointed this out, the disclosure happened with Carl Nell, David Grush. You know, that was disclosed, like they've disclosed it. And now it's just sort of which story turns out to be the accurate story, the accurate version of events. Is that right? Is that kind of your...
If you're asking me,
yeah, where your thoughts are on
it. By a lot of people's standards, disclosure has happened. Yeah, we've had people that are in a position to know, say under oath, that we have reverse engineered crashed technology from NHI. And there's been a number of we'll get into it a little bit later, I'm sure, but upon a second watch of the latest hearings, you can actually make a number of inferences based on the answers, particularly from Elizondo, and also from the questions of the people that actually asked on the committee. There's quite clearly a lot of information circulating behind the scenes that is all trapped behind these, let's call them non-disclosure agreements. I don't know the terminology that they'd actually fall under, but I would say there's a lot more going on than we know about, and there's a lot that we can actually infer from the answers that we didn't like the first time around, but when you actually analyze them, they make a lot more sense. Does that make... I see you smiling, so you must know.
Yes, I'm with you on that one. When I first watched it, I was a little upset. You can definitely see that in my analysis that I gave right after the hearing. I'm like, what was this? And then I did analysis the next day. After I simmered down, I rewatched it, and I'm like, I can see the positives to this. Yesterday, I was a little bit too worked up.
One of the main ones that I saw was Elizondo was asked whether or not he was read into crash retrieval programs. And
right.
You know, he has signed an NDA. He made that very clear in the hearing, but he could have said no. But instead it was, I'm not going to answer that. I'll answer it in a classified setting.
Right.
I think that's the thing, right? Like a lot of, you have to, and this is something that we in this space do every day, right? Like you learn to read the coded language. Lou Elizondo speaks in code and riddles. It's like you have to read between the lines, look at his body language. You know, he's trying to tell you more than he can tell you, but he has to do it in a very specific way. And I feel like a lot of times people get they're disappointed that he's not just like going to come right out and hand them the keys to a UFO. But it's like, these are real people with real families that suffer real consequences. And it's hard. It's easy out on the sidelines for us to criticize, oh, well, they're not telling us everything we want to know. But faced it with the same set of consequences, I don't think any one of us would do anything differently. In fact, it's pretty amazing that they've come as far as they have, I think, all things considered. In fact, I just heard the other day that Grush, the way that they got to him was they left a note inside his house to threaten his family, that they got into his house and left a note there So that this was on Richard Dolan's show. And so he came home and he found it, and it was like, we can get to you anytime. That's terrifying.
That's terrible. It's awful. And because on how David Grush was treated after the hearing, I think it scared a lot of people that wanted to come forward, because Grush was put under a lot of heat. He hardly did any interviews right after either. And people were pulling this poor man apart who wasn't a politician. He was just a guy that had served our country, and he didn't know how to handle that kind of heat. He actually went into seclusion after the hearing. And so I can understand other people seeing that as an example and saying, "Ooh, people are too brutal. Maybe people aren't even ready for this information," and things like this. And while it's very disappointing to hear, we got lucky that 4 people came forward, spoke under oath, and gave the information that they could for the most part. And the biggest takeaway for this hearing is that what they said was under oath. Everything can and will be used against them. They know that, but they still took that leap forward anyway, because they know how important this conversation is. And all of them, I think minus Gold, really emphasized that they really care about this topic. People have the right to know. And they all mentioned that in their written testimonies as well, and how passionate they are about the subject.
I think it was amazing that you had an admiral testifying as well. I mean, that's in terms of just rank, and for a guy of his rank to come out and say, yeah, this is real. And not only is it real, they chase our submarines and they can do all these amazing things. I mean, the information was dated and it was sparse, and that's okay. I understand. Yes. But I get why that's frustrating, but still, that's pretty impressive. You know, this isn't just, it's hard to shoot down a guy like Gallaudet at his level. And Gold, I feel like they missed the mark. Xander, I think you pointed this out. He worked with Bigelow for like 13 years, and they didn't ask him anything about Bigelow or the CIA transfer of that technology. Were you disappointed by any questions that should have been asked but weren't asked?
I think, when we're dealing with representatives and congressmen, they need to ask specific questions in order to help them understand the national security threat issue. That's the stance that they're taking. So, of course, there are certain questions that I want asked, but that aren't relevant to them. Something that was brought up by Frost is referring to NASA and saying, well, like, okay, well, if NASA gets the information to all of this UFO data like you want, Michael Gold, how are you going to give us that transparency? And Gold had stated 4 times in 60 seconds how transparent NASA is. But looking at the UFO media briefing alone that took place in September of 2023, there was nothing transparent about that hearing. And I'm just taking my perspective from NASA being transparent from that briefing alone, because they didn't tell us how much money they were getting. They didn't tell us who the new chief for the Independent Study Office was going to be, and a few other things. And then on top of that, they were speaking to people, their audience, like they were children. Like they had no idea, like they didn't know anything about space or their research, and it was very condescending. Michael seemed to have adopted that same conversation style in his hearing on Wednesday. So that part, I was like, they weren't bad questions. How can NASA be transparent? But it was the way that they were answered in the sense of tone of voice and style that I'm like, you could have done so much better, but you didn't. And so that left a high level of disappointment there.
I know what you mean about that previous NASA meeting. And that was the one, I think, where Bill Nelson was like, we're going to get to the bottom of it. You can bet your dollar, you
can bet your boots.
Bet your boots. We're NASA. We're the space people. And I'm like, yeah, well, where's the office where you airbrushed out? Let's get Gary McKinnon on the phone and find out what's going on at NASA. I think that, there are serious questions about NASA's transparency and their ability to be truthful with the American people. But I feel like Gold's heart is in the right place. He was trying to basically like tee up an incoming, this is my guess, he's trying to tee up an incoming administration when they're going to make all kinds of appointments on who's going to be in charge and who's going to do whatever. He's kind of laying out a roadmap. This is what you could do with NASA if you wanted to.
See, I saw it more as like he wanted NASA to be contracted by the government to look at UFO data to get the funding. For me, it was more of a money grab from my perspective than anything else. And I want to be with you, Clint, that maybe his heart was in the right direction. I want to give this man the benefit of the doubt. But the answers that he was giving, it was
really
a
likable.
little hard.
It was a little hard. Sorry, Mike. We tried.
If you don't mind me just...
We're trying.
I have a couple of things. The reason I'm on camera is a couple of things I want to say about Mike Gold. It was Ross Coulthardt's analysis straight after he did a live Q&A, and I watched that. We were talking about how there's so much to consume. I have literally not stopped consuming since the hearings on Wednesday. I've consumed everything there is to watch. So I watched Coulthardt's analysis of what went on, and he did talk with some knowledge and some insider sources about the fact that the higher ups at NASA aren't really the guys that are in the know. It's more they're two or three steps below the leadership, that they're planted there to be the roadblock.
Right.
So it wouldn't surprise me if Mike Gold genuinely is speaking truthfully. He's a really likable guy. I wanted to like him in the hearing. He was so nice. But there was one interesting question in the hearing, and it was either Mace or it was Bobert. I don't remember who it was, but one of them was doing a quick fire yes or no sort of things, and they said, is the government hiding information related to UAPs or NHA? I'm paraphrasing there, but it was a straight up yes or no. Does the government know more than they're saying? And they went down the line. Gallaudet said yes. Elizondo said yes. Schellenberger said yes. And Mike Gold also said yes. When he's come from a position of, we just need more data, we need to analyse the data, I would have expected, based on the rest of his testimony, for him to say, I don't know. But he said yes, which was, I found, the only interesting part of his testimony, personally. I don't know if you guys picked up on that at all.
I caught that, and I thought I was just waiting. No one asked him about Bigelow, and that's the thing you ask about. Like, I think my frustration is with the members of Congress who aren't as educated, and probably rightfully so. They have other things to do on this topic, than we are. But if you know anything about it, you know that, just look at his LinkedIn, like look at his Wikipedia page. You could go ask him about Bigelow. Then you can ask about the CIA. You can ask about, they at least got Lockheed. I think Nancy Mace pinned down Lou Elizondo on General Dynamics and Lockheed. So we got those names into the discussion. But Mike Gold was there, and I think it was a missed opportunity. The whole NASA thing, I get it. I see what you mean. Yeah, it's a little... it's a little frustrating, but yeah, it was a weird answer. Based on the rest of his testimony, I didn't expect him to say what he said. Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. And something else that I was really glad that was brought up was the Langley Air Force Base incident that was written by the Wall Street Journal that took place in December of 2023, where for 17 days, there were these, quote, drones, and that's in quotation marks, that flew over the Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, but that were outmaneuvering F-22 fighter jets. Training was canceled in the area, and those jets ended up having to be relocated, which is pretty remarkable, because if they really were drones, those things wouldn't have happened. So for it to be addressed twice, both by Grothman and by Timmons, demonstrates that these people do have an interest in what's going on in the news with UFOs. They were able to put it in the congressional hearing, but it was a little sad that none of the panelists really provided any sufficient information regarding that incursion that took place in December of 2023. But it's still cool that they brought it up twice. Not once, but twice. That part was great.
Well, that tees up a really interesting pivot here, because Xander has pulled up the Immaculate Constellation documents. I think there were 12 pages, but we have 11 of them, as I understand.
The 12th page was Corbell's letter.
Was that okay?
Yeah, that was the 12th page.
I thought it was the cover page, and he was just asking about it. Have only read the first 3.5 pages. I haven't had a chance to go through all of it. So, but what I saw there scared the crap out of me because it's terrifying. Can we talk about that for a few minutes? I understand you have some skepticism about this, and I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So to give people a preface, do you want me to share my screen, Xander? Is that it?
If we want to share the report, I've got it pulled up here. So
I'll. Oh, okay, cool. Because I'm seeing that like share your screen, and I'm like, I don't have it pulled up.
Don't worry.
But so let's back it up. Let's talk about what the Immaculate Constellation is and how we got this information. So we got it from Michael Schellenberger, who is a journalist, and he gave us like a little taste of the Immaculate Constellation a few weeks ago. And obviously, it caught the attention of literally everyone that he ended up becoming a panelist for it, which displays, I think, to a lot of people that there's something to it. And these congressmen took this very, very short, tiny report seriously. For the very first time, it was right after the hearing, Nancy Mace made the Immaculate Constellation report public. It's 11 pages. And in this report, it talks about, let me back this up 1 second. During the hearing, people were asking Schellenberger, there were a few, one of them being Higgins, stating, are you the author of this report? And he says no. And he says, okay, well, who is the author? And Schellenberger says, those that came to me to talk about the Immaculate Constellation. It was actually several people that are or former DoD employees. We don't know who these people are. We don't know anything about them. And so obviously these congressmen said, well, did you vet your sources? How credible are these guys? How did you know these men or women were credible? And Schellenberger said, well, I did my research. I looked into them. They did say who they said they were and things like this. And so then we finally got this report, 11 pages, and it goes over different UAP shapes and characteristics, also a few UFOs, UAP, that swarmed pilots while flying in the air, which is definitely scary if you are a pilot. And then also you have these shape-shifting craft that are jellyfish shaped, which in 2024 we've been hearing consistently as a shape, even though these type craft have been seen since the late 1940s, according to MUFON investigator Bob Spearing, who I had on the show to give us more information on these jellyfish type UFOs. And so it's interesting that the Immaculate Constellation brought this up. But one thing that caught a lot of people's attention were these reproduction vehicles, which Schellenberger abbreviated as RV, which featured prominently in several significant military encounters, and there are surveillance footage as well. Along with, during the hearing, Schellenberger stated that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of crispy UFO photos and videos, and not those lame blobs that we get today when we use our iPhone or Android to take a picture of a UFO. But instead, with the technology that we have, the military, they have captured pretty detailed images, at least from the information that was provided to Schellenberger when he was interviewing these, quote, whistleblowers and or witnesses. But there were some very remarkable things about this. Now it's just knowing who these people are, who gave Schellenberger this information, and then continuing to dissect this data, really, that's kind of what it is, and deciphering on our own if we think it is true or not. But this lays very nicely with the Arrow report that was released yesterday. It was their annual report. And even in that report, and I was very shocked, actually, they also mentioned jellyfish-shaped craft as well. So that right there, I thought aligned rather nicely.
So what's your take on the Immaculate Constellation pages that we've seen so far? I mean, do you feel, you mentioned earlier that you have some questions. You're not entirely, where are your questions? Like, what are the nature of your questions? What are you trying, other than who are these people that gave this information? Is there anything else that jumped out at you?
Well, no matter the data, you always have to be skeptical. You can't just believe everything that you read and take it as the gospel. We can't do that. It's too dangerous. And we have seen our fellow pioneers fail time and time again with misinformation and disinformation. Reports similar to these come forward, and people just take it like, oh my gosh, this is the new UFO Bible. And it can be a little tricky. This topic is known for its misinformation and disinformation. And sometimes the person releasing it doesn't know that. And of course, my issues here are just we don't have any follow-up data or information. We only have these people's word. And of course, I want to take their word for it. It should be so valuable. But how we've seen the government act before, to them, their word doesn't mean much, especially if it's not under oath. So that's where
fair.
my issues lie.
That's fair. But I think it's pretty significant that Schellenberger went under oath to vouch for it. I feel like that's a pretty that's a bold step.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm with you on that one. Go ahead.
No, after you, please.
Thank you. Also, him stating that he would go to prison to protect those that have come to speak to him was also remarkable as well. It does definitely display his courage to talk out about this publicly.
I got the sense that this was another opportunity, basically, for them to lay out a roadmap for where Congress needs to go next. Like, this is the direction you need to go in. You need to start looking at this Immaculate Constellation program, dig into it, find out if it's real. I feel like the process of disclosure is like building a bridge across a body of water into the fog. You have no idea how far it is to get to the other side, but we're building this bridge one plank at a time. And sooner or later, we're going to get to the other side. But in the meantime, it could be tomorrow. It could be an hour from now. It could be a year from now. We just don't know. But I think the document itself seemed to fill in a lot of gaps in the question around what is actually going on here. And the mention right at the top of alien reproduction vehicles, and that there's an entire effort to track and observe these things, that reminded me of something that Lou Elizondo said in an interview a while back on Theories of Everything, where he said sometimes if you put information out and the enemy knows that you know, they might be forced to take an action that you're not ready to deal with. And I was like, wait a second. As I'm reading this, it looks like another country has reverse engineered successfully some of these technologies, and they've deployed them. And our military and intelligence apparatus is tracking them. And they don't know that we can track them. That's how I'm reading it. So maybe it's Russia, maybe it's China, maybe it's somebody else, who knows. But somebody else has, and this technology represents the ultimate first strike weapon. It would be the first strike, last strike, game over weapon. So if they are ahead of us in any way, or they even have this technology and they find out that we can follow them, track them, take them down if we need to. I mean, there was just so many references to ARVs and other countries in there. And just in the first few pages, I'm not even through the whole thing yet. I thought, man, that's scary. That means the geostrategic chessboard is really weird. It's like way weirder than we thought. There's all kinds of other stuff happening under the surface.
These guys are definitely playing 3D chess, and there are a lot of UFO offices around the world. Actually, the US and Canada, they're very behind with publicly acknowledging their UFO offices. Uruguay was one of the very first ones in South America in the late 1970s, early 1980s. We know that Japan, China, and Russia all have their own UFO offices and have for decades. So they've been researching this very diligently. And then you have the United States that have, again, publicly acknowledged their UFO office, being one of the first ones, the UAPTF, and the AOI MSG, which is like the worst acronym you could ever think of. AIMSOG, like, why would you do that? And now we have ARROW, which sounds so much better. But these offices have been, in some ways we've been lucky that they have even released their reports, even though in many respects they are nothing burgers. It's really nothing to see here compared to other countries. At least we're actually getting reports. But if we look at South America in particular, they're very open about the UFO conversation amongst politicians, those in power, and even your day-to-day neighbors as well. You ask them, aliens, UFOs, and they're like, yeah, duh, of course. I saw one back in 1976 when I was just a kid. And they're very open about these conversations more so than the United States back in the 1980s, 1990s. We're just now catching up to these other countries mentally. But in today's age, there's like this consensus worldwide that there is something going on, and the populace of the entire globe is really showing an interest in it, which is very exciting.
Well, I'm glad you phrased it that way, because that brings me to my last question. I know you're short on time today because you have a lot of things on your plate, but I wanted to talk to you about this big rumor that has been going around in the community for months now, or for years, really, depending on who you talk to. An event, something big, something huge. Forget government disclosure. Let's leave them out of it for a second. The rumor is out there that something huge could happen, or might happen, or is going to happen in the next few years, 2027, 2028, somewhere around there. Some people say a little later, some people say a little sooner. What do you make of these rumors? Do you take any stock in them? Do you feel like there is a chance that something else could happen to trigger disclosure? It feels like there's something under the surface moving everybody and motivating them to take action right now. What do you think about all this?
I'm not a gambling man per se, but I would state that we've been having that rumor go on for decades, literally decades. And it hasn't held any merit as of yet, but I think it'd be very exciting. So many movies, sci-fi movies, have modeled that as their narrative. And so the movie Contact is, or Arrival is one of those examples. But is it possible? I know it's cliche, but literally anything is possible. If these entities are so advanced with their amazing technology, these transmedium objects can go into the water, in the air, in space with no issues, they could show up whenever they feel like it, if they really wanted to, and if they felt, maybe, if we were ready. But we might also be dealing with a handful of different entities with different agendas as well. Maybe they're battling up there and saying, no, we should disclose. Yes, we should. No, we shouldn't. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool, to be honest. But then you have this, and it's been sprinkled in consistently of, oh, you mean Project Bluebeam, don't you? And that's adding a lot to this muddy water of, like, if we were to get this mass sighting, people would immediately say, oh my gosh, they're holograms. It's the government for Project Bluebeam to control the populace. And that's a possibility as well, but it's definitely a more darker outlook to that if it does happen. So could it happen in 26, 27? I hope I'm alive to see it. That'd be cool. I would pull up a lawn chair, drink a strawberry milkshake, and say, bring it on. Let's see what you got.
I think that would be most people who are ready for it. And I wonder how big an event would it take to really just close the book on this once and for all for everybody? Does it have to be like Independence Day level, or could it be something smaller, or there's so much weird stuff happening all the time now. What would it even take to convince people?
We've gotten a lot of mass sightings. One of the more famous ones is the Phoenix Lights in 1997. Thousands of people saw it. It was caught on camcorders. And at that moment, those interested in the topic thought, this is it. Like, this is disclosure. This is the thing. Then you have the Colares, Brazil incident in 1977, where this small fishing town off the coast of Brazil was being terrorized for 6 months by UFOs. That's disclosure. That's terrifying. Then it took place again in 2016 in a small indigenous town in Brazil as well. But there have been these handfuls of these mass UFO sightings, and we think, this is the one. This is the disclosure. But then it gets very quickly buried. So maybe the next one that we have, the same thing might happen. I can't say for certain as of yet.
They show up and they don't leave. They're just there for weeks. I think that would be the thing. It would have to be Phoenix Lights in like 100 cities, and they're just there for like 6 weeks. That would do it.
I hope so, at least. But the mind is fickle, and it's very easy to manipulate when looking at the media. So it's hard to say on how people would really take it, and if they would believe their eyes or believe their ears on what they're being told.
Last question I want to squeak in before you leave. I know you've got to run, but Boebert brought this up during the hearing, and I was just surprised that she brought it up at all, because it's sort of the fringe of the fringe within the community, this conversation about hybrids. What do you think?
Yes.
Do you think there's an abduction side to this whole story that needs to be further explored, or is that something that it's a little too far out for most people right now?
I think it was a great question that she asked. It needed to be on record. It has been addressed before, but for it to be brought up yet again, it's remarkable. And it's disappointing that none of them knew the answers to it, if there even were answers. But is there a hybridization program? Well, if you speak to people that believe that they are starseeds or have had their children taken from them during an alien abduction, they would say yes. But your day-to-day person, they would think that you're still a little crazy. While this topic is more digestible overall, the hybridization part it's still a little bit tough to talk about, especially since we just don't have enough information. Yes, there are some women that have scars near their lower abdomen area, which is important. Men remembering their abductions where they had their semen taken from them, which is terrifying. Whitley Strieber is one of those people who has very openly spoken about his encounter in his book Communion, which he originally wanted to title Body Terror, which displayed to him that what happened was terrifying. So it depends on who you talk to on this one, but I am glad that Boebert asked that question. It's just unfortunate that people were focusing on her opening statement more so than the good questions that she asked during the hearing.
Fair point. Fair point. Well said. Cristina, thank you so much. I know you have to run, but it has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Where's the best place for people to follow your work and what you're up to next?
Yes. So a little bit later today, I'll be talking and going into detail on the Arrow Report with Micah Hanks, the co-founder of The Debrief. You can find that on my YouTube at Cristina Gomez. There is no H in Cristina. Or you can check out my website at strangeparadigms.com. There you can find all of my shows along with all the articles that I write as well to make this information as digestible as possible. If you prefer watching stuff or reading stuff, you can find everything on my website at strangeparadigms.com.
Outstanding. Cristina, thank you. We'll let you run. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cristina Gomez, everybody. Make sure that you subscribe. Go there, go to her channel and subscribe and share some videos and get involved in the conversation over there. We have a lot of overlap between our audiences, so I know we've got a ton of fans out there. So we've got about an hour left. Xander, where should we go next?
It's just you and me now, boy.
It's just you and me. Get right down. We're going to solve this thing.
I would like, personally, and I'm being a bit quiet because my child is sleeping in the next room. I want to dive into the Immaculate Constellation report that was showcased in the hearing. There's a lot of questions that come from this, and maybe you've got some first interpretations. So I know we spoke a little bit before we went live, but let's see if I can get...
well, why don't you have actually completely read the document all the way through? So why don't you start us off with where your head's at after you've seen it all? I mean, what's the 30,000 foot view, and then what jumped out at you in this?
A couple of the biggest takeaways that I saw was, well, not just a takeaway, it's more of a realization, is that if this is a program that is really collecting from all sorts of military operations, they're collecting a lot of satellite imagery, and it's kind of displayed in the report as well. They have an acronym for it. When you see it, I'll let you know. But it seems like there's a lot of top-down video, or at least that's what's reported in the examples that they go through. So, and it made me think, yeah, we don't see a lot of that in what we see on like Reddit and things, because people just post from like their mobile phones and things. But that would make a lot of sense. We have so many satellites now. Obviously, we have high quality imagery from satellites. That was the first big jump out for me. The second, probably the second largest thing was all the descriptions of the types of craft. They go into quite a lot of detail about the types of craft that are reported. and we can get into that as well. The last thing would be where this program is controlled from. So, I don't know. I think firstly, I'll show a quick clip of Nancy Mace after the hearing. It was somebody from NBC talking to, and to be fair, he did quite a good job. He talked to Nancy Mace about Immaculate Constellation. So let's go to that. Just bear with me a second.
It's important that if the Pentagon or other federal agency is hiding these programs that they deny from the American public, and yet we learn recently that it actually does exist, the American people ought to know the truth and the facts. There's so much that we have overclassified. You can't talk about the date of some of the alleged UAP imagery, for example. Some of the witnesses couldn't even describe what they've seen because of the way things have been overclassified. You can't talk about the budget for some of these programs because that's classified. We overclassify everything into what end? Does it really make America safer? I don't think so. And the American people deserve to know the truth.
It must have been very frustrating for you sitting up there and not being able to get a lot of those straight answers. Was for people that were watching it too. And then you posted this very mysterious report for the public to see with alleged details about Immaculate Constellation. What is in here is wild. I mean, and I'm paraphrasing, but reports of F-22s getting like boxed in by flying orbs that they couldn't shake. There were satellite images or satellite image of a football field sized flying saucer hiding in clouds seen from this satellite looking down. Have you seen any of this footage or these images?
I have not seen those images or footage, but of course we're going to want to go digging for it in a skiff right after this. But the question I asked Michael Schellenberger, the journalist who was there testifying today, was when he wrote this report about the Immaculate Constellation, did he have more than one source? And the type of sourcing he used, he had multiple sources, they had clearances, they were very credible individuals, and that's really important detail when you're bringing forth this kind of information.
Absolutely. And Congresswoman, the testimony we heard today, I mean, it was suggesting that around the time that Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon helped get those black and white videos out in 2017, that's when this like shadow program was spun up to kind of vacuum up all the data in a way that the public would not know. The allegation, if I understand it correctly, was that it was done out of the executive branch, which would have been President Trump at the time. The president right now, or the president-elect seems to be appointing some pretty heavy hitters that have been.
So I'm going to pause it there purely because there's more to say about the fact that.
You see her night shift necklace, by the way?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
she's a big fan of the show.
So. Yeah, I don't know who that guy is, but he points out quite rightly that the report itself was approved for release by the executive branch rather than the Department of Defense. It wasn't approved by DOPSA. It was approved by the executive branch, which kind of leads you to believe that either the source is from the executive branch or the program is managed from a top level at the executive branch, or both, or part of. Which makes you think, okay, does Trump know about Immaculate Constellation? Which is big.
If it happened on his watch and the executive branch is in charge of it, and that's what this report is saying, then there's your answer. Then they would have to know, right? Like, he is the executive branch. If we know anything about Donald Trump, is that, like, next to Dick Cheney, he's in charge. Like, he's the guy. Once he's in the Oval Office, he's running the show. So in theory, he would know. And I think there's a to your point, I want to share this. Let me share my screen here. This is IFL Science. This is just an article written about this case that is the where is it? The Costa Rica UFO sighting.
Apologies, you lost me for a second there. Let's
I lost you.
So you want
that going
to share
through?
This? Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so this was shot in 72 on these ads. September 4th, 1971 in the morning by a team from National Geographic Institute of Costa Rica studying the potential impact of a hydroelectric project that was being planned around the volcano. Unbeknownst to the photographers at the time, the image of an unusual metallic disc-shaped object was captured in the corner of one of their frames. The nature of the unusual object has been furiously debated over the years. Blah, 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 blah. And then some people say it was a hoax. Okay. But when you look at the picture, here's the craft. And they did a drum scan of this negative, which is enormous. I've got it on my computer. The last time I tried to open it, it crashed my computer. That's not just this one photograph. But they blew it up. And this is what the photo shows. This is shot on film from an airplane flying over this region. And this is what they got. Now, if what Michael Schellenberger is claiming is true, if that report is accurate, and we have satellite footage from today's modern satellites of UFOs hiding in cloud formations and maneuvering around, and ARVs, not just UFOs. That's the other thing about this. A lot of these are ARVs that they're talking about. Imagine the detail. If this is 1971, what could we possibly, even back then, our satellites could see people walking around on the street, individual people. I think 30 years ago, they could read the time off of someone's wristwatch, or they could read a gum wrapper in an alley. Can you imagine the level of quality that we must have now?
Maybe
so
I'm
that
wrong.
was interesting.
As far as I'm aware, that has never been debunked, that photo. Maybe it has. I don't know. I'm on Reddit far too much, so if it has been debunked, it was debunked on a day. There are no days where I'm not on Reddit, so
I just don't believe like a lot of the stuff they say gets debunked. Like, I need to see it. Show me where it was debunked. Like this one, I'm pretty sure has never been debunked. This is considered one of the most famous, next to the what's the other one that was shot in the UK with the big, it looks like a diamond with a jet flying next to it, and it's going over the horizon. That one. There's like 3 photos that are the top photos, and this is one of them.
What I was trying to share before, I think it was a mistake that I made on my part, but I lost connection for a second.
This is the deep state. I got you.
The fact that this report was the public version of the author's report was reviewed and approved for the public release by the Department of State, Bureau of Global Public Affairs. That's not DOPSA, obviously. So that's, as far as I'm aware, that's the executive branch. So what do you make of that? Like, does that mean that this is a program managed by the White House? And if that's the case, Trump will be the top guy, was the top guy when this program apparently was started. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Well, Rex Tillerson was in charge of the State Department under that administration, the first Trump administration, and Mike Pompeo. Rex Tillerson from February 1, 2017 to March 31, 2018. He is famously a former oil executive who was put in charge of the State Department. I forget which oil company it was, but it's an enormous one. And Mike Pompeo served April 26, 2018 to January 20th, 2021, former director of CIA and U.S. congressman from Kansas. Interesting, those two people, that one of them would have been in charge of the department when this was approved. So that's something worth asking about. Mike Pompeo worked for the CIA, the director of the CIA. That's interesting.
What happened between, I can't pretend to know every single thing that happens with American politics. You guys, you go nuts on a daily basis. So
It's insane.
Did something happen between Trump and Pompeo? Because Pompeo has been in the news in the last week. They were somehow expecting him to be appointed to something. I don't remember what it was. There's just too much noise to cut through these days.
The first Trump administration was a series of people being brought in and then let go. Like Trump would just fire people. He wouldn't even tell the person that was being fired. He would just tweet it and it'd be like, that person's no longer here. And they would be in the bathroom at work reading the tweet like, oh, I guess I just got fired. That happened like constantly. And so everybody came in and was replaced. Interestingly, another person who was served in the Trump administration was Anthony Scaramucci. Anthony Scaramucci was his original, I want to say, press secretary? Was it the press secretary? He worked for Trump for like 2 weeks, and then he was let go. Scaramucci went on to the ISALT conference that Carl Nell spoke at. That's him. That's Anthony Scaramucci's group. He's on the board. If you go to their website, that's his group. So that's weird. And at that meeting, they were like, "What? What are the chances that it was Carl Nell saying that there's zero doubt that this is all real?" And he's talking to a bunch of Wall Street guys. So I know that the first Trump administration was super chaotic, and there was a lot of like back and forth between different people, and there was sort of a revolving door of people coming in and out of the White House. And by the end, I don't think any of the people were the same that started, but it's just it could be that it just slipped through, and maybe this did happen. I think what's interesting is you have a guy like Schellenberger, who is a legitimate, real investigative reporter who has a tremendous career and history of breaking stories.
He said in the Jesse Michaels interview, he's been in front of Congress 13 times at this point. So yeah, he knows he's a seasoned journalist at this point. 13 times. He's going under oath. The consequences of him lying to Congress under oath are astronomical. In fact, Nancy Mace tweeted that out this morning. She was like, it was in response to a Green Street thing. They were getting into it about Lou Elizondo or something. And she just said, just heads up, like the consequences are astronomical. He's confident enough to go in under oath and present not only the contents of this report, but give them 11 pages of it and hold it up on television and say, like, this is the real thing. If he's got multiple sources corroborating the information in that report, and what we saw, what you have pulled up here, is the civilian unclassified version of that. Holy shit. He not only...
There's your answers, like that. All the loose clues, all the weirdness, like all of it. You read that report, and I can't wait to finish it. But just the first 3 pages, I'm like, oh, this is what I've been looking for right here. This explains all of it.
I think Cristina talked about the number of sources that Schellenberger had as well. In a interview that was straight after with Jesse Michaels, in fact, he was asked about his sources effectively, and he said, he would take 2 sources if the quality of the information he was given was really beyond doubt, but normally he would go for far more than 2. And he kind of insinuated that it's not just 2 sources for the whole document. He's got multiple sources for like all of this, basically. The points that he said he only had 1 or 2 sources, I think he's actually stated in the hearing. He was like, I've only heard this from 1 person, so that's all I know. But as far as I'm aware, for the report at least, a lot of it was corroborated by multiple people, and I'm not just saying 2; it's more than 2, which is crazy considering the quality of the stories in here. Not just the military intelligence, which is the intelligence that's not backed up by video evidence, but is, multiple people within the military witnessing something. But there's also high quality 4K, like the best
high quality.
Of the best.
It's the mother load. It's the mother load. He basically, like, that's how I read this whole hearing. It's like Schellenberger holds up this document. He's like, this is it, guys. Go get them. Like, here it is. I'm showing you. And then you've got Admiral Gallaudet and you've got Lou Elizondo going, yep, that's where it is. Like, you need to go get it. It's up to Congress to go get it now. Like, I think you would have to be out of your mind to go up in front of a congressional subcommittee on television in front of the entire world with a resume and a career like these gentlemen have,
Schellenberger didn't need to. With his career that he's already had, he doesn't need to do what he's doing right now.
None of it.
Absolutely no way.
And to lie in that setting would be insane. I believe it's easier for me to believe that they're here, that UFOs are real, and there's all this stuff is actually true than it is for me to believe that they are bullshitting and that this is some kind of like twisted, 4D chess game that they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes in some really weird, complicated way. And at the end of it all, like, let's go through this report for people who haven't looked into it. Can we go through some of these cases that you pulled up? Because they are crazy.
I want to start with this Popcom intelligence vessels positioned to collect on reproduction vehicle. So if I zoom in here, can you...
I'm going to blow it up. I've got Acrobat open on my desktop here so I can...
So I'll start this. On USG networks, there exists infrared footage of and imagery of grouping of vessels engaged in SIGINT and MASSINT collection at night in a specific area of the Pacific Ocean. In this footage, which was in close proximity to the vessels, a large equilateral triangle UAP suddenly appears directly over the ships. That's in itself suddenly appears. What does that even mean? That in terms of conventional air travel, that in itself is completely new. Nothing suddenly appears. What does that even mean?
Okay. I'm just going to read the first paragraph, like the first two paragraphs of this whole thing, just for people who haven't seen it, just to kind of like frame this conversation, because I think this context is super important. Okay, this is just from the introduction, so I'm going to just read it. Bear with me. We should do the background music. If you got some spooky background music, this is worth it.
I got it.
This document is the result of a multi-year internal investigation into the subjects of unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, technologies of unknown origin, TUO, and non-human intelligence, NHI. It's important. Those three things are not all the same. They're three different things. Keep that in mind. This investigation was undertaken in response to urgent and credible threats to the public good and safety of the United States of America and provided to Congress through the UAP whistleblower mechanisms established by Fiscal Year 23 National Defense Authorization Act. The next paragraph goes on. The results of this investigation are deeply disturbing. Elements of the U.S. executive branch have conspired to prevent the U.S. legislative branch from exercising its lawful powers of governance with respect to UAP, TUO, and NHI issues. The information provided by the author strongly suggests that the U.S. executive branch has been managing UAP, NHI issues without congressional knowledge, oversight, or authorization for some time, quite possibly decades. This criminal conspiracy keeps the elected government of the United States and its citizens ignorant to profound discoveries and dire threats originating from the existence of UAP, NHI, and their technologies. Okay. Now, Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program established following the public disclosure of the AATIP OSAP programs by Luis Elizondo in 2017. Immaculate Constellation's primary mission is collecting imagery intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena and RVs, reproduction vehicles, utilizing tasked and untasked military intelligence resources as part of a network of SAPs linked to non-human intelligence and UAP technologies. The idea being that this is like a hub and spoke thing. Like there's Immaculate Constellation is the hub of the wheel, and all of the other SAP programs that are surrounding it from different agencies, all that stuff is feeding into this one program. But they talk about
somebody from Dolan's podcast, Levine, said under Constellation you've got Zodiac, and then under that you've got all of the reverse engineering and the crash retrieval stuff.
So this is where it gets really weird. It goes, the intelligence within the Immaculate Constellation program primarily consists of high-quality imagery intelligence, collateral measurement and signatures intelligence of UAPs and ARVs within the Earth's atmosphere, The collection platforms involved are a blend of tasked and untasked capabilities in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, military and civilian aviation altitudes, and maritime environments. So sensor systems across, like from the ocean all the way into space, all looking for UFOs, UAPs, and ARVs. UAP and ARV signatures and preferred operating areas are known to the program. They know where these things are, and they know where they probably know where they're coming from. They know where they're going to, and they know where they're active. We do. There's crazy.
There's a couple of stories in here that actually they mention the fact that the actions of either the UAP or the military lean into the idea that at least one of those parties knew where the other was going to be. And I think in the example story, they talk about the military knowing that the UAP are going to be there. I don't know specifically off the top of my head which page it was, so I will try and find it in the background. But that was weird to read, because it's the only time it's mentioned.
Well, if to your point, in the case you mentioned about the naval group and the triangle that shows up above them, triangles are commonly described as like ARVs. That's what Stephen Greer says. He's like, if you see a triangle craft, that's one of ours. Like more often than not, that's us. But what if it's not us? What if it's the Chinese or the Russians, or if it's an adversary, right? Basically, what this is saying is somebody else has this technology and they're flying it all over the place, and they can appear above our battle groups with some kind of superior weapon. That's terrifying. That means, holy shit, that's scary. Forget UFOs. Like, there's this whole other unstable element out there that we can't predict. We don't know what they're going to do. That just took my breath away.
A large equilateral triangle UAP suddenly appears directly over the ships. Like, if we're in the Pacific Ocean and we're not right next, like, how does something just suddenly appear? That makes no sense to me, unless it's using a means of propulsion that we don't understand.
Or if it's cloaked, it has a perfect cloaking technology, and it's just decloaking above the group. And that's just maybe a way of letting us know, like, hey man, we can find you too. We can get to you anytime. And then maybe that's the state of play right now. There's this uneasy sort of weird, stability because no one's done anything yet, but at any moment that could change. But I really thought the phrasing of this was kind of frightening. It says, like, the safety and security of the United States, the dire threat proposed by UAPs and their technologies and NHI. It suggests that the author or some of the sources for this report are super concerned that something dangerous or risky could happen, and they want to get this information out as quickly as possible at the risk to their own careers and their own lives that they must be taking to do this. Shows that they take it super seriously.
Yeah, I mean, this report it seems like, maybe it wouldn't make the report if the people that are in control of this program knew what this was, or knew its origin at least. But the fact that this reproduction vehicle, not just that, why are they even calling it a reproduction vehicle? If this is such a nothing burger, this is all this specific report talks about is a triangle appearing over vessels in the Pacific Ocean. Why do they relate triangles to reproduction vehicles? Because the next story is, again, it talks about triangle UAP, but this one, how do they know it's a reproduction vehicle? There's got to be something somewhere that says if it's a triangle, that's ours, or at least
that's
a foreign adversaries.
That's my point. It's like they know which ones are ours, as in human, maybe not American, but human. And they know which ones aren't ours, which means they've got a whole system in place for classifying and understanding these objects. They know where they're coming from. They know where they're going to. They know sometimes where they're going to be. I can totally see why what Lou Elizondo said previously about, like, sometimes you just don't want to say anything because you can't tip your hand that you know these things. Then the enemy knows, like, oh, well, shit, we have to change up our whole thing because they've caught on to our game. If drones are being spotted loitering over American military bases and around our nuclear assets, and what we are to believe that these are foreign adversaries' drones, like regular plain old drones, like quadcopter drones or something, then why aren't we shooting them down? Why aren't we intercepting them? Why aren't we gathering data about what these things are? They're not. So they're not drones. There's something else. And it goes to this one case here that this is, I'm going to just see if I could share this screen.
Yeah, sure.
This is from this is just my Adobe Acrobat. CENTCOM cuboid
may
formation.
Have to zoom in a second. Hold on a second.
Let's see here. Whoops.
All right. So you may have to zoom in, but yeah.
All right. Let's see if I can just. How's that?
There you go. Yeah, we can see it.
So CENTCOM, cuboid formation of metallic orbs on USG networks. There exists daytime FMV and daytime FLIR footage of a formation of 12 metallic orbs skimming the ocean surface at high speed before dispersing in multiple directions. The rapid and agile maneuvering of the metallic orbs were incompatible with known aerospace vehicles and were between 3 to 6 meters in diameter. That's like a big ass car. The opening segment of this footage, in the opening segment of this footage, the 12 metallic orbs flew in a tight cuboid formation. The metallic orbs were in 3 vertical square formations of 4 orbs each. So like if you drew dots on a piece of paper and you made a cube out of dots and you had 12 dots to make a cube, that's what this formation was. Arranged in a 3-pronged configuration, creating the illusion of a cube shape at a distance. All the orbs were white hot against the black cold ocean in the FLIR footage, and each sphere created a faint atmospheric distortion around both itself and as a heat shimmer contrail. The metallic orbs moved in this cube formation over the ocean for some time before rapidly breaking formation as pairs. That sounds like some combat shit. That sounds like some kind of combat formation maneuvering exercise. The sensor platform lost track of most of the metallic orbs as they ascended in altitude and accelerated in speed, but maintained observation on a pair of orbs continuing the original trajectory. Like, holy shit. That's crazy.
I think it just doesn't make sense. That's the big takeaway. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, nothing we do does that.
But doesn't it? I mean, it kind of does make sense, though, right? Like, in a way, like, what if it's just what it is? What if it's just they're here and they are? Maybe some of these actually are a threat.
When I say it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for humans to do this.
Oh, to have, like, for us to have anything like this?
Yeah, there's they've got to be. I don't even know how many decades ahead you'd have to be able to do something like that. It's not a case of like back in like 30 years ago we didn't know the B2 existed, and you know when it came out it was like, okay, cool, that's kind of cool to look at. It looks all sleek and everything, but this is like century. It's a different kind of. It's a whole different ball game when it comes to propulsion, when it comes to coordination, when it comes to speed. Like this isn't just the next level. This isn't just what generation fighter are we in now? 3rd or 4th? This isn't the 6th. This is like the 28th. Oh,
this is something. This is, well, it's what Fravor says. It's like, it's beyond anything
us.
we have.
That's the answer. It's not us.
It's not us. I want to show can I show an ABC News clip without getting dinged on YouTube? Okay, let's try this.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Let's just.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
Dice.
We'll roll the dice.
You'll
so
have to share screen again.
This was all right. So I've got a few tabs here. This is immediately in the aftermath of the hearing. One thing I've noticed just changed immediately is that mainstream media is totally reporting on this now. Like they're on board, and that's something that's relatively new.
Absolutely nothing on the BBC still.
ABC News has a segment. NBC News has a segment. Forbes News has a segment, and Today also has a segment, and then the Telegraph also did a segment on this. So I'm going to go with ABC News first. I'm going to show you this clip and then listen to what they say in this. This is really interesting. This is now mainstream ABC News. Listen to what they're saying here.
Are you
this
sharing
is crazy.
Screen at the moment?
Here. Sorry, here we go.
A new report now from the Pentagon about unidentified flying objects. There were hundreds of new reported sightings over the last year, and some the government still can't explain. Chief Global Affairs Correspondent Martha Raddatz joins us with the details. It's quite the talker. Martha, good morning.
Good morning, Whit. It does. It all sounds straight out of a science fiction movie, but these unidentified airborne objects are taken very seriously by the Pentagon and the intelligence community. And this morning, their new report revealing that these sightings are on the rise.
Navy pilots have seen them.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
More than 1,600 unidentified flying objects have been reviewed by the government's Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARROW, over the years. 98% of them eventually found to be debris, drones, or even large birds. But new numbers this morning from May of 2023 to June of 2024 show 757 new sightings, with 21 of them that cannot be explained. And all 21 mysterious objects were seen near national security sites, witnessed by multiple people or captured on sensors or videos. While the Pentagon does not know what they were, they are quick to steer the public away from little green men.
To date, the department has discovered no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial beings, activity, or technology.
But at a hearing this week, the former head of the Pentagon program investigating these objects says nothing should be ruled out.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes. Let me be clear.
Come on, yes.
Advanced technologies
Yes
not made by our
to
government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations.
While Pentagon officials do stress that they have no evidence of any of this being alien technology, they have not ruled that out and are continuing to investigate every unexplained sighting.
Yeah, we won't hold our breath, but this is ABC News, NBC News right here, Forbes, Today, Telegraph, all covering this. Sightings are on the rise. They're seeing more of these things. They're seeing them around sensitive military installations. Then you just look at the Immaculate Constellation report, and what they're describing is some scary shit. This is a show of force. That's what this is. A lot of these things. Like there's one, I have it pulled up here. On USG networks, there exists OPIR footage of a large saucer-shaped UAP emerging from within a dense cloud formation. Remember the Costa Rica shot we just looked at? That photograph of 1971?
So OPIR is the overhead, isn't it? That's
overhead
effectively
platform,
satellite
infrared.
or high altitude.
The saucer registered black hot against white cold with atmospheric disturbances caused by the saucer-shaped UAP visible. The saucer was between 200 and 400 meters in circumference and displayed symmetrical concavities on the upper surface. The saucer-shaped UAP emerges at a shallow angle, traveling upwards towards the outer atmosphere. After breaking above the cloud cover, the saucer-shaped UAP suddenly reverses its direction, descending partially back to the cloud cover, then accelerating rapidly out of frame and partially obscured by the cloud tops. This behavior was evasive in nature and implied that the saucer-shaped UAP had become aware that it was under observation by a space-based collection platform. What? What?
That's juicy. That is juicy. However, and it's not just that that's some, well, technically the report is somebody just saying this, but if that footage exists, there's a there. You know?
Well, for one, if you were making this up, right? Like, let's say that this is a weird psyop. Like, what's the goal? What is what do you gain by saying these details? Like, how does putting that out there help the cover up? I can't imagine it does in any way. The disinformation and misinformation is like, leading you off down a false path. But this is like an enormous amount of statements in one place about a lot of different things.
If anything, it's overkill. Like I will be the first to admit, I am very glad. I'm happily led down rabbit holes on a daily basis. This is one hell of a rabbit hole to just write one day. they didn't have to go to this sort of great length to convince me of a falsehood. Like, if they want to, I watched your videos of Dan Burrish for like 3 hours, and that leads you down some wild rabbit holes. And
where there's smoke, there's fire. And I got to tell you something about Dan Burrish. Those videos, because I look at the comments that come through, the people who comment on that, there is a very dedicated and very angry group of people who come down on Dan Burrish so hard, and I cannot believe they're real, legitimate people. I feel like these have to be bots, because the things they say are so repetitive, and it's so much the same story. If this guy, just to dovetail off what you said, if Dan Burrish is lying, then he did it 30 years ago, before YouTube, before a mature internet, in a time where the only way to find out he had done an interview would be to watch the VHS tape. It doesn't make any sense. And if you were trying to do it to make money, there's no money to be made in this space. It doesn't make any sense at all.
He's still maintaining his website.
He's still got a website.
Why
it's
is
weird
he
as
still
shit.
maintaining it?
And the detail, it's the amount of detail. It's not that, could some of it be wrong? Maybe. But even if you just took let's just go to the next case here. Northcom jellyfish, UAP crosses U.S.-Mexico border. On USG networks, there exists FLIR footage of an irregularly shaped UAP flying across the southern border. The UAP appeared in FLIR to be modeled irregularly with hot and cold emissions. This is the jellyfish video I think we all saw. With a jellyfish or floating brain, in quote, with hanging appendages in appearance. The UAP flew against the wind with no visible means of propulsion, maintained an unnatural rigidity in its movements and flight path, and maintained a comparatively low altitude to geographic features. In appearance and behavior, the footage of this UAP violating the airspace of the southern border resembled the same class of UAPs observed near DoD facilities in Iraq and Afghanistan. There exists at least one compilation video of this class of UAP sourced from DoD Force Protection Assets and Theater ISR, which uses this footage as a point of comparison. So they've got there's so much of this shit out there. They have a compilation video of all of them.
They've got their own YouTube.
Well, some of them are on YouTube. And then he's saying, I guess the author of this is saying that there's more inside the Immaculate Constellation program. So we've got jellyfish now that can sail over a classified military base. They can just cruise through the security perimeter and float above the heads of, you could see the guys walking around, and this thing's just sailing right through. No one even looks up. No one notices. They have perfect cloaking technology. They're probably everywhere. They can definitely come out of our bases anytime they want. They obviously are doing that. I don't know. I feel like the guy in the movie who is I'm freaking out a little bit, but I feel like it's a justified freak out. It's we're at that point now where you could be like, dude, is the house on fire? I smell smoke and it's starting to feel warm in here. Is there something going on?
To just bring it back to...
Bring me back down to earth.
No, because I think this is all true at the end of the day. I was going to say, because the common phrase is let's just come back to reality, but I think this is the reality, and I truly do believe that. But it's easy to, and we were talking about this before we went live today, and not just between ourselves, but with Cristina as well. It's important to try. There's so much stuff now to ingest all the time. It is important to just remember this isn't going away anytime soon. So if you want to take a day to not read about this stuff, that's completely understandable from my point of view. I know 100% once we're finished today, I'm going to open my YouTube when I get into bed, because it's 20 to 9 here. I'm going to open my YouTube on my phone when I get into bed, and it's just going to be full of incredible interviews with all of the, Corbell, Elizondo I know went live in the last hour. Mm-hmm. I know I'm going to want to watch that. And it's going to be so hard for me to not click that. But I do think for those watching, if you feel like you're feeling a little bit obsessive at this point, I get it. Me and Clint are exactly the same. Take a day off. That's all good with don't blame yourself if you need to take a day off, because this is heavy shit, and it just keeps getting weirder and weirder every single day. When Corbell first released the jellyfish video, I was actually really skeptical of that video. I was like, that's too weird for me.
Too weird.
And now we're like 3 months later, and I think that's completely legit. Only 3 months difference, and I even posted saying I fully regret calling Corbell out on that video, because it really is an incredible video that he released. It wasn't debunked in the end. It was crazy.
I think there is a case to be made for an appropriate level of concern within our community now. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to stake out a claim to a little piece of territory in this space right now. I'm going to say it's time to start lightly freaking out just a little bit. Don't freak out in public. Don't get kicked out of Chili's. But if what we're seeing is accurate, and some percentage of it is probably accurate, I'm watching this unfold, and I'm seeing the information that's starting to come out with increasing frequency, at increasingly high levels of detail. And the outline that it's kind of sketching out for us is that something is going to happen. Something big is going to happen. We are not able to handle it. We're not ready to respond. And this report right here is really. Can we go through the physical effects? You had it pulled up a little while ago. It was the table, and it was like sphere and orb, and what happens to people when they're in the proximity of these things.
Yeah.
Do you still have that?
Yeah. So I don't know, for those that haven't seen, there was a table further on that basically described, I think, 4 or 5 different types of UAP, and they all go into detail about the biological effects of that particular kind of craft. So that's the sphere right there.
So sizes range from small objects to those several meters in diameter. This looks like a sphere orb. I don't know if they're like, when we say sphere, I think of a stainless steel ball, like a big, that's what I think. Orb, I think of a ball of light. I'm not sure if these are necessarily the same thing, but it seems like they're in this report referred to as if they are one and the same.
So maybe a little bit of flavor there, and you can take this with a pinch of salt. You absolutely should. The 4chan whistleblower describes orbs as hammers that just emit light, and what you're seeing as the orb is light, basically.
Oh.
So they're actually, and he said these are the more common now because they are drones, and they emit different colors of light based on what they're doing, effectively. But they are all apparently shaped like hammers, but they emit light,
a ball of light,
to the degree that it looks like an orb.
But if you were able to shoot one down or shut it off and it landed on the ground, it would look like a hammer? Is that what you're saying?
That's what
like a carpenter's hammer, like.
Yeah.
That's weird.
It is very weird. Yeah, and and to go back to your point about Burrish's detail, for that, I think is a very strange detail to lie about. Why would somebody talk about these orbs as if they were shaped like hammers? That's a very small detail to lie about. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I just don't see how does that diffuse the conversation or screw up our community? It doesn't make sense.
It's a very good lie, is what I'm saying. It's either true or it is a very good lie.
Well, it goes on to say, like, biological effects of being in close proximity to an orb or a sphere. Biological effects. Close observers reported feelings of unease and of electronic device malfunctions. So this is, from what we're gathering, a drone device. It's some kind of drone technology. They can send an orb out, and in the presence of that orb, it can short out electronics. It can observe. It can interact with people. It can make you feel super weird and have feelings of like anxiety and paranoia and like you're being watched. That people report that all the time. That's really weird. The saucer Visual disturbances, shimmering air, sudden fog formation, tic-tac, observed ability to hover and then accelerate suddenly. Some encounters described in maintaining stable positions. Triangular, medium to large size, ranging from F-16 to football field size. Slow, precise movement and rapid acceleration, often reported to emit a soft humming sound, may affect electronic devices within a certain proximity. Black or dark gray, sometimes with white lights at the corners and a central red light. Reports of twinkling stars across surface.
That central red light, that is literally the TR-3B.
Well, it says underneath that,
yes, there's more as well. Yeah.
Long-term biological effects, long-term psychological effects, such as anxiety or insomnia, Cristina, have been noted alongside the feeling of being watched or shared awareness with the triangle UAP.
That's out there.
I mean,
that's not nuts and bolts. That's more than nuts and bolts. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Okay, here's one. I'm just seeing this for the first time. Table 6, irregular organic, highly variable from small compact forms to larger, more sprawling structures. Surface details. Descriptions vary widely from smooth, fluid-like surfaces to complex, articulated structures. John Wagant, the U.S. Marine who was stationed in Peru in the early 90s, he has a crazy story. It's on Stephen Greer's YouTube channel. I've been wanting to do a deep dive video on him for a long time. He describes in his interview a crash that he and some other Marines were sent out to secure the area. They go out to the area, they get there, they find this craft. It's buried in the side of a rocky outcropping. Half of it's underground, half of it's sticking out, a piece of it's open, and inside it's all dark inside, can't see anything. And he said, it looked organic. He was like, it looked like it was made in like an artist's studio. It didn't look like it was made by a machine. It looked like it was made by hand almost.
What's strange about the jellyfish type, in that original video that Corbell released, and I agreed with the conclusion that the seemingly temperature fluctuations were just an artifact of the camera that was used to capture it, right? Because it was because the background was changing. Effectively, the foreground's heat signature would change as a result of that. But the atmospheric phenomena for jellyfish / other, there's a section called atmospheric phenomena, and it says sudden temperature drops
and cloud formation.
Yeah, it's weird. it's a little bit too close. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I'm reading because that's what I'm getting. I'm reading this thing and I'm going, okay, what the report describes is these things are all over the place and they can do whatever they want at any time. They can appear anytime. They can outmaneuver all our aircraft, and they're just way more common than people know. And maybe that's the big secret is really if we knew how many of these things there were, maybe the big reason they want to keep it secret is because whatever we think might happen, like an Independence Day thing, it's already over. It's already over. Like we're already surrounded. They're already in the house. You just can't see them. They're everywhere. And there's nothing we can do about it.
The more this goes on, and the more material I'm ingesting about all of this, it's that the government knows a lot, but it really essentially doesn't matter how much it knows, because we probably have a lot less control over the situation than we think we do. The government can't come out and say, NHI are here. We know where they are, but they won't let us get within a mile of them. They would literally just won't. They won't talk to us. And I did a post on Reddit probably about a year ago now, saying that maybe the horrible truth is the fact that we're being denied a seat at the table here, and maybe the US governments maybe we're able to down a few, but we're simply not smart enough to understand their technology. We don't have access to the elements that they use to make their craft and everything. Maybe we've tried to talk to them, and they're just simply not interested in talking to us, because it's like asking a human to have a conversation with a dog. What's what's the point? What can you really learn from that conversation?
I don't know. If my dog asked me a question one day, I'd be like, "Oh my God, go on. What else do you have to say?" And in here it says ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles. So if you take that at face value, then we can reverse engineer that. We have, and we've built our own craft, so they're out there too. So now we've got a situation where there's an unknown but significant number of non-human intelligence technology platforms operating on, in, and around our planet at all times. As we sit here right now, probably hundreds, thousands maybe, all around, all over the place, under the ocean, in orbit, zipping around. You could be outside, like walking out to get the mail or going to the store, and there could be zipping over your head at 70,000 miles an hour in perfect silence. You'd never even see it. You'd never know it. Those are there. And then ARVs from an unknown number of other nations are also in the mix, coming and going, doing weird things. Holy crap. Well, how do you even process that? If you're in charge of defending this country and that's your job, how the hell do you even start to look at a problem this size?
It's like the next level of mutually assured destruction. It is, at this point, who was it that said if a nuke was launched with malintent, you've roughly got 7 minutes before the end of the world, effectively. But this is just the next level. It's these guys can just appear, and then that's it. And that's it. You're done.
Exactly. It was Annie Jacobson.
That's it. That's the one. Yeah. I'm terrible with names. So, but yeah, it's exactly that. This is the next step up.
Well, what was that? There's a nuclear weapon that Putin talked about a few years ago, and he said it was. This is stuff that we know they have, right? They had a torpedo. I forget if anybody out there knows the name of this.
It was called like Satan or something.
It's like the Satan nuclear weapon. This is crazy. It's a torpedo that has a nuclear power plant on board, and it's powered. It can loiter in the ocean indefinitely. It's just a nuclear propelled torpedo that just sails around underwater, and at any time it could sail up to the coast of the United States, the East Coast. They could detonate it, and it would cause a tsunami, a radioactive tsunami that would go up to the Smoky Mountains and basically just wipe all these people out. This is what we know they have. Now imagine you could take something like that, or some kind of a huge nuclear weapon, and put it into a craft that could go from Moscow or wherever in Russia to Washington, D.C. in less than a second, and then just go off.
Well,
you'd never see it coming. You couldn't stop it.
The description of the reproduction vehicle is that it just appears. There is no warning. That it just appeared over the vessel. That's it. And then the end of that report was that it disappeared as well. It didn't leave. It literally disappeared. So what does that mean? Does that mean it went very quickly? Did it use an entirely different form of travel? Like, the only thing I would say is that if we have successfully reverse engineered this technology, it's reasonable to assume that it would be on the same scale as when you first invent the jet engine. That was transformative, 100% it was. But our jet engines now are completely different to the original jet engines. The principle is the same, but they are not the same beast. So maybe we have ARVs, maybe we have that form of propulsion, but can we use it to the same degree? It's like the difference between Little Boy and Fat Man and Tsar Bomba. Tsar Bomba took an extra however many years, 20 years, 30 years on top of the original sort of nuclear deployments.
Well, it's like comparing like an F-22 to a P-51 or something.
Yeah, they have the same engine. It's the same. They're pushing stuff out the back. They're doing the same thing, but one, it's almost unrecognizable, but physically it is doing the same thing, and that's why I would imagine that would be a bit another reason why the US and China and Russia would want to keep this under wraps a little bit, because they could say, we do have this, but we are miles away from where it could be because we've seen it.
Imagine too, if as is implied in this report, they're recovering ARVs, which means they're recovering reproduction vehicles made by other people, other humans that are crashing or going down. So imagine you're you know, I don't know, you're a team of Air Force commandos or Navy SEALs or Delta Force guys or whoever goes in to get these things. You get there, you move up on a craft, you find a bunch of human beings inside, and they've got, you know, Chinese insignia in their uniform, and they're Chinese military or Russian. What do you do with that? Where do you even begin? Or what if they're, I mean, God, the implications are just stunning. There was I was just talking to Brian Jackson yesterday we were texting back and forth, and he said that there was a episode on Cosmic Road, and they had Daz Smith on as a leader in, I'm just reading this text, as a leader in a remote viewing session. The aim was to help Jon Stewart verify the alien video that was supposedly taken at S4. And then he basically gives me a summary. They had like 5 different remote viewers all look at the same thing, unbeknownst to each other. So each one individually doesn't know that the others are looking at the same thing. And he showed me the summary reports from each one of these remote viewing sessions, and they're basically the exact same report. Like every one of these people saw the same things from one to the next to the next. A lot of it substantiates Dan Burrish's story. But if that's true, and you know, we're grasping at straws, we're really trying to like piece together a picture, a coherent picture from all these different rumors and stuff. It just goes so much deeper. There was a mention in one of these about let's see if I can find it here. Summary of viewers' data. So this might, I don't know, maybe shed some light. The remote viewing this event. The craft and the biologicals are all sentient. They have a reptile feel to them. The target is an event telling of truth and evolution through disclosure. Multiple biologicals involved. One is smaller, scared, anxious, uncomfortable. Communication felt difficult, like 2 different radio stations with static. They were here to plug something into the ground, which would broadcast. They are thin, bony, flexible, fast, and strong. The skin is leathery, tough, and thick. They have long arms with 3 or 4 jointed shoulder with a backwards thumb and 3 fingers ending in a pad. This is all remote viewing data.
I'll be right back, by the way, Clint.
Okay. They go... Here we go. Target consists of land, biologicals, and structures. This is a different remote viewer. Now, a different person. There is involvement of a structure in the air. The purpose is establishing an agreement between 2 different parties. One side is human and military, representing a powerful country. The other side is non-human. There is some deceiving going on. This all revolves around a structure. 2 separate meetings, one upstairs, the other, the focus of the target took place in a hidden space underground. The structure feels stony, big, massive, half in and half out of the land. The land around is natural with hills in the background. Within the structure, there is a central object curved on a platform. The biologicals were wrinkled skin, thick, looks old, dark gray or gray. It looks like elephant skin. They don't look friendly, on a mission, emotionless, uniformed, militaristic, biological, a negotiations meeting. One side is human, uniformed, camouflage, serious, hopeful, high-ranked. The other is masked and ugly. It moves sluggishly in its non-human. It feels like a puppet. This is very deceiving. An agreement or cold exchange for weapons, tools, or energy. I don't know. What do you guys think, chat? I just can't shake the feeling that there is something bubbling under the surface that is making its way towards the surface. That's the information that we're getting now points to some kind of a larger thing that's happening in the background that might burst into public awareness unexpectedly at some point in the near future. Based on what I'm seeing in the rumorverse and on this report, if any of it's true, then it's scary, super scary. All right, Xander, I think that's our time for today. But is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I just kind of want to echo what I said earlier. Like, it has been a big week with news. And let's not pretend there's not a million really good podcasts. There's so much good stuff to consume these days. You can spend all week doing it if you want. I don't. After watching the hearings this week, I think I don't have the bandwidth to think about this 100% of the time.
Take the weekend off, man.
That's what I mean. So I think, the world is going to be here on Monday. I've got a birthday party this weekend. I'm going to try my best to enjoy it. I think the hearings, we moved forwards, 100%. We definitely moved forwards. But realistically, it's probably going to take a bit longer than you want to get all of this stuff out. So don't neglect the rest of your life to watch that video to stay up to speed. Does that make sense?
Live your life. Like right now, my son just got home from school. I'm going to go hang out with him, and I'm going to not think about UFOs until like Sunday night. And then I'll try to like whip a show together for Monday. But in the early morning on Monday, I wake up at 4 o'clock. Let's try to catch up on a weekend's worth of stuff. Xander, you're so right. This is at the same time the most exciting thing that can be happening. There's so much reality to it. There's so much to grab onto. There's so much evidence in support of all of this stuff that it's intoxicating and it's addictive. And you can take one step down this path and find yourself in a rabbit hole so deep you can never get out. It's critical to take that time off and spend time with people you care about and just do other things. Go outside, go for a walk. You're so right. We're going to wrap it there, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Thanks for being a part of the conversation. Special shout out to Cristina Gomez for joining us. She's always fantastic. Please go to her channel and subscribe, follow her work. She's awesome. And hopefully we'll get her back soon. And we'll see you on the next one. We'll be back Monday, and we'll see what else we can find out between now and then. I'm going to take a couple of days off, and I'll probably sit back down and catch up on Monday morning. But until then, keep looking up. Thanks, everybody.